Good morning. Just waiting on people to join. Oh, Alexandros. Oh, it's weird. They don't have you. Oh, they do have you now as a participant. Well, when you sent that message, they didn't have you listed yet as a participant. Okay. Let's get started. So, in the actual course, when I teach this subject, I teach it as standing meditation. This is that the whole purpose of this course, the Five Foundations, is to teach city dwelling lay people how to be able to take meditative practices into more and more and more of their life. That's the whole purpose of this course. I have been training for about 20 years as a city dwelling layperson with very good teachers of various traditions, mainly the Gelug Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but also a number of others. And also got a master's degree, a bachelor's, and a PhD looking at various subjects related to Buddhist practice. Notably, my master's degree was looking at almost every bit of research that's been produced on Buddhist meditation in particular since about 1960. So I've had the chance to think about this, and I've had the chance to practice a lot of different techniques and to see what works for myself, and also to talk to a lot of other people and see what works for them. So when I designed this course initially, I designed it in such a way that I was trying to think, okay, for the average person who is not probably going to spend very much time in retreat, and even some people who have been with me training for quite a long time are having difficulty carving out, you know, 5 days, which is not that much time, really. Uh, Having difficulty carving out 5 days to just do training and nothing else. So, I mean, this is a good example, really, of why city dwelling lay people in these times need techniques that work in the midst of everyday life. So, when I designed this course, I designed the body scanning portion and body awareness portion of the course as a standing practice. The reason is that if you want to be successful in meditation as a city dwelling layperson, I have a very strong opinion that you need to learn how to take your practice off the cushion. You need to learn how to be able to do practice while sitting, of course, but also standing, walking, ultimately also working and engaging in ordinary activities, including your leisure time. Your leisure time activities like exercise or sports, entertainment, having conversations with people, etc. That being said, we are actually in retreat at the moment, and because we're going to be doing a fair amount of the body scanning uh, technique, I think that I'm going to teach this as a standing practice still, but we're actually going to do the practice sitting down. Okay. Let me just make sure that. Okay, good. No one's telling me that something is broken this morning. If the screen is black or something, you do have to let me know. Okay. Okay, so general competencies. What meditative skills are we actually gaining with this technique? So we're learning how to get the mind into the body and into all the tissues of the body. We're learning how to keep the mind inside the body during the duration of the practice, because normally our mind, at least in terms of its imagination, if not in some other ways, is trying to run all over the world. It's trying to it's like a they say sometimes it's like a bird on a ship when you're out at sea. The mind takes flight and it tries to fly all over the place, and ultimately it has to land back here in the body, because that's where it's based at the moment. uh, and then of course being able to generate a state of concentration while in a standing position. So if we were going to do this practice, which we will a bit as a standing practice, then we would need to be able to generate, or rather, we would be gaining the skill of generating meditative concentration while standing. So the prerequisites for this, of course, are, I mean, you could jump straight into this practice. Quite a few people do jump straight into standing practices, and you can generate concentration just using these practices. However, I think it's much more difficult for a lot of people to start with a moving object of meditation. What does that mean? That means that you're placing your attention, for example, on your hand, and then you move your attention and place it on your forearm, and then the next part of your forearm, then your elbow, and so on. So the object isn't actually the same for the whole session. You're moving to different objects. However, your mind is in a continuous state of concentration as it goes through a series of objects. So I think that's more difficult than placing your mind on a single object and holding it there for 5 minutes, you see? However, the benefit of body scanning is that, number one, body scanning is a technique that makes your mind very calm naturally. So there's something about doing body scanning which makes the mind's makes conceptual thoughts less. And this is not just known by Buddhists. Even the U.S. military, for example, when they're teaching soldiers how to fall asleep in the middle of a battle, right? When there's gunfire, there's explosions, but if you don't sleep, you're not going to last very long in an ongoing battle. So one of the techniques they teach soldiers is you lay down, and then you start with your head or your feet, and you put your mind into your feet, and you tell them to relax, and then you put it into your calves, and you tell them to relax, and then you put it into your knees, and you tell them to relax, and so on and so forth. And usually, by the time you've made it, halfway through the body or up to your head, or a couple of rounds of this kind of exercise, you've fallen asleep. So even even under extreme conditions, this type of technique can make the mind very calm. So as I say here, the mind will be calmer and conceptual thoughts will be reduced. Yeah. So thinking about the 9 stages of meditation, the first technique is mainly aimed at the first 2 stages, placing the mind and fixation. Being able to place your mind on the breath, hold it there, and mostly not lose it. Some of you may attain patch-like fixation, or may even attain continuous fixation with this technique. Is that the name? No. I can't remember the name of stage number 4, but in any case, being able to place your mind on the breath without losing it for the duration of the session. So some of you may be able to go that far with breath, and that's fine. But I think many people who don't have a lot of time to sit are going to find it difficult to get into stages 3 and 4, where they can hold the mind on the breath, for example, and only have short periods where they lose it, or to continuously hold the mind on the breath without doing retreat or doing really long sessions. I think people are going to have difficulty doing that. However, If you train in this technique, the body scanning technique, you can achieve stages 3 and 4, I think, pretty easily. So we started with Foundation 1 to try to gain some experience and actual taste of stages 1 and 2. And now, in the 9 stages of calm abiding, we're going to be working on mainly stages 3 and 4. However, you may recall in the first 4 stages, the big problem you have is coarse excitement, right? Coarse excitement, where the mind is jumping off the object and running around out of control, and then you have to forcefully bring it back to the object. When you get to the 4th stage, where the mind is no longer jumping off the object, you have a new problem, which is that your mind starts to distract inwardly, and the mind gets lax and tired. It starts to kind of sink in terms of its energy, and you will literally get stupider if you sit in that state. One way to make the mind more fresh and bright is to do analysis, do some type of analysis. So we're also moving on to body scanning because it's a type of analytical meditation. So if we're going to be moving from stage 3 to 4 to 5, it behooves us, it's a good thing to do, to try to do some type of analytical meditation that will also improve the freshness of the mind, especially if we're going to be sitting for more than 5 minutes, which we will be, or standing for more than 5 minutes, which we will be. Okay? All good, no blank screens. Fantastic. Everyone can hear me and see me. Okay. So now we know why we're doing this technique. We know where it fits into the 9 stages of calm abiding as city-dwelling lay people who are doing their best to try to attain these mystical sounding things in the midst of daily life. And yeah, again, as I say here, this, if you do it as a standing practice, a bridge that allows you to take what seems like an isolated thing, being able to sit quietly and focus on something and have your mind be quite calm, right? Okay, that's fine. But then what do you do with that? How do you bring that into the rest of your life? Well, you need to train in bringing it into the rest of your life. Well, how do you do that? Well, you need to train doing it in different postures that are increasingly demanding in terms of what it is you're asking your mind to do, until you can bring a meditative, concentrated mind into all the things you do, right? This is how you progressively train to bring greater meditative capability into your activities. So, training in body scanning as a standing practice will also therefore help you take meditative concentration into more of your activities. To be more specific, anytime you're standing in line at the grocery store, anytime you're waiting for a doctor's appointment, anytime you're just sort of sitting there without much to do, instead of scrolling through social media, you can begin doing this body scan meditation. And don't look like a weird robot or a zombie or something. Still act like a normal person, and don't let people know that you're doing these things internally. But you can do these types of techniques while you're sort of standing and waiting for other things to happen. And therefore you can generate a pretty deep state of concentration, even in the middle of ordinary kinds of activity. Okay? So what I've described then is the benefits, why we're doing this, where it fits in the process of training, and how it allows you to take your training into everyday life. So are there questions about any of that, or shall I continue? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I will carry on. So In terms of the actual posture for standing, I'm bringing this over from Chinese martial arts, Tai Chi in particular, where they call standing meditation and the first standing posture for standing meditation they call Wuji, ultimate posture. Um, this is a very, very comfortable posture to stand in for long periods of time, and makes the body feel quite healthy and comfortable. So starting from the bottom, your feet, your ankles, and your knees. So your feet are facing the front, as you can see here. They are between shoulder width and hip width. So the width of your hips and the width of your shoulders, they're somewhere in there. And when I say facing front, I mean that if the pinky toe is sometimes doing its own thing. But if you look at the remaining toes, basically your feet are going to end up about parallel if you ignore the pinky, right? So if you include the pinky, then you may end up sort of squint because of the way that the line that it creates. But if you ignore the pinky and just sort of look at the inner edge of the foot, you're creating a parallel line, like you're standing on train tracks. So you're also here standing somewhere between having flat feet and having arched feet. So what that means actually is that you've engaged there's the long muscles and tendons that run on the bottom of the foot, and those are engaged and stretched a little bit as you're standing. So you're in this arched position, but you're putting a little bit of pressure on the arch. Not a lot. You do want to have a nice arch, but you're putting a little bit of weight on that arch, just a bit, so that those tendons are engaged on the bottom of the foot. Not through squeezing them tightly, just through putting a little bit of weight on them, almost like you're stretching them just gently, very gently. So in anatomy, they refer to that process of moving the foot like this, where it becomes flat. They refer to that as unlocking the bones of the foot. So when you create an arch like this, the bones interlock and the foot becomes hard. And when you move like this, the bones sort of they move their position so that they're a little bit more open and there's more blood flow, and the foot isn't sort of crunched up tight. There's a little bit of movement, a little more movement in the foot. So this is somewhere between a heel weighted distribution and a toe weighted distribution. It's somewhere in between. You're not fully on the toes, you're not fully on the heel. Okay? And what that means is you're somewhere between a muscle oriented distribution and a bone oriented distribution. If you're on your heel, the weight of your body rests on the heel, and you have to engage very little muscle in the leg. For example, if you lock your knee and you put your weight on your heel, it takes very little muscles in the foot and the leg and to remain upright. But if you move towards the front a little bit, well, now all these muscles have to engage to hold you up, and that's actually the position that we're in. And we're using not clenching sort of muscular force, but we're using a little bit of stretch in the foot and the ankle and the calf and even the top of the thigh. We're using a little bit of stretch through that tissue, ultimately to hold ourselves up. In the beginning, it won't feel that way. It'll just feel like really uncomfortable. but eventually, by putting just a little bit of stretch on the bottom of the foot, you end up putting a little bit of stretch on the whole leg. And that stretch is ultimately what holds you upright, instead of having to use a ton of muscular force, although you do have to use some muscular force to hold yourself up, obviously. Okay. So the hips, the waist, and the spine. So the perineum area is aimed downwards. So you don't want to aim the tailbone downwards, or you're going to be pulling the natural S curve out of the bottom of the spine, out of the spine, right? So here's your tailbone. If you pull the tailbone this way, it straightens the bottom of the spine, right? And you lose the natural curve. So actually what you want to do is the tailbone stays here, but the perineum, which is between the anus and the sexual organs, that's what's moving downwards, and that maintains the curve of the spine, but elongates that curve slightly, right? So that same posture is what you're doing when you're in seated meditation. So even when you're seated, it's not that you're rocking the tailbone downwards, which unnaturally elongates the spine, and you have to tense the lower belly and all this stuff. Rather, you're just letting the weight of the sort of from the perineum, letting your weight fall downwards, and that keeps the natural curvature of the spine, slightly elongates the spine, and makes it more comfortable to sit. The same is true if you're doing the standing version of this practice. Okay. This is a little bit detailed, but one of the students here in the group has done these practices quite a bit, so I'm going to describe the hips as well. So the when you're releasing through the legs, the hips are in the joints like this, right? Boom, right? So the hips, the bones come up like this, and then they come like this, and they enter the hips in this manner. So what you want to do is, here's the sort of ball that's in the hip joint, right? That bony knob that goes into the hip joint there. So this is the top of the what is it? The femur, right? That as it enters the hip socket. So what happens quite often is, as especially you rock the hips backwards, the hip bones go like this. The bones in the sockets go like this. And so you want to, in the beginning, actively rotate those outwards. And what that'll do is, in effect, rotate your feet. Even though they're on the ground this way, it'll rotate your feet a bit like this. And then you end up with that natural arch, blah, blah, blah. Just don't twist your knees. That's the important bit, or your knees will start to hurt. And so in that way, you open the front of the hips, but do that without rocking the tailbone underneath you. Otherwise, you lose the natural curvature of the spine. Okay, chest, shoulders, and arms. So the chest muscles relax downwards. So the muscles in the actual chest here relax down. They don't relax forward, okay? Not like this. They just relax down. And same thing, muscles on the back of the shoulders also relax downwards. Again, a good rule of thumb is bring your arms like this, right? And just sort of wiggle your shoulders a bit until you feel that the inside of the shoulder feels kind of nice and relaxed. And then once you've done that, then just let your hands float down without changing the shoulder. And you'll find that the front muscles of the shoulder and the back muscles of the shoulder have relaxed down. And if you do this properly, where you haven't curled the upper back and you're not unnaturally lifting the upper back, and you've relaxed the shoulder and you've relaxed most of the tension in the elbow and the wrist and the hands and everything, then you end up with this kind of posture for the upper body, right? Where how do I do this without touching it? I guess I can do it like this. I don't know if you can see my pointer or not. Then you end up with this kind of posture where the arm seems to be from the elbow, seems to be slightly rotated out, but you're not actively doing that. It's just that when you relax fully, the arm ends up the elbow ends up floating out a little bit, rotating out slightly, and the arm hangs in the joint. And so once again, when you're doing meditative practice, right, the advice I gave you before was, right, you just as a quick hack, you put the hands like this, rotate the thumbs downwards, and then bring the arms back, right? And then you just sort of wiggle the shoulders a bit until the shoulder really drops into the socket on both sides, okay? And then from there, you just bring the hands back into correct position. So this is the same position when seated, you see? So from here, you now just let the arms, if I was going to place them on the lap, they would end up this way, right? Or place them on the knees, rather, they'd end up this way. Now, if I was standing, and I do the same exercise, right? And I let the shoulders relax into the joint, and then I bring them down, they end up hanging here, right? In that forward-facing position. Does that make sense? So that's the position for the hands and the arms when you're doing standing practice. Okay. And then finally, the neck, the head, and the face. So as I was saying yesterday, you have these sort of bony knobs on the skull here and here on both sides. You're actually sort of lifting from there. That's where the head is lifting up from. You definitely don't want to pull the neck back like this, because that will damage your neck over the course of time. Another way to think about it is at the this is called the Marshall crown. So towards the sort of, if you divided the crown into three sections, here's the middle of the back portion, here's the middle of the front portion, in a sense, right? So here's the line in the middle, middle of the back, middle of the front. Then the Marshall crown here is where you're lifting the skull from. Now, part of the reason for that is that towards the back of your skull, here actually, is where the spine enters. So the spine doesn't enter here in the middle. It enters here towards the back of the skull. So the joint is here, right? So if we're trying to get the head into the appropriate position, then we need to rotate it from back here, not pulling it back, obviously not bringing it forward, okay? For the eyes, the eye posture, this is not essential, but it can help. It can help for the early stages of this practice. You bring the eyes a little bit more closed, not fully closed. And then once you have them sort of half lidded, half closed, then you went black. It's black right now. Oh no. Okay, well, I'll do that. So let's see. So what I was saying about the skull. Okay. Yeah, so what I was saying about the skull is you have these two bones here, and the joint is actually through here. It's not like here in the middle of your head. It's here, right? Towards the back. That's where the spine is entering. So if you were looking at my neck, the spine is coming through back here. It's not coming through the middle of my neck, right? So if I go like this and I pull backwards, or I try to lift from the middle, see? This is what a lot of people do. They think this is what I need to lift, and they lift from here, and they end up with this weird, super straight neck that's uncomfortable, okay? So instead of that, you keep the natural S curve of your neck, and you lift from here, the back third, right? That's where I'm lifting from, and I'm just rotating this joint at the top. You see? So now, taking it all together, and then the eyes. So the eyes, you're just sort of, you don't have them fully open, obviously, and you don't have them fully closed. If we're going to be taking this practice into daily life, you can't be sitting there with your eyes completely closed, right? So one technique that's used quite a bit is you bring your eyes to about half lidded, about like so, right? And then you aim your eyes about 45 degrees down towards the ground. And so when you stand like this, it actually, I think even to normal people, it looks like you're sort of thinking about something, which is fine. So then you could stand in the grocery store, you're waiting for your turn in line. You don't want to stand there like some kind of weird Asian martial arts scarecrow. But you could stand there in line in the grocery store, what have you, with your hands in your pockets, or just your hands here, and just looking at the ground, waiting your turn, right? And so while you're doing that, you have the posture set, and you're just you're advancing in line and you're waiting your turn, but internally you're doing this body scanning practice that I'm going to describe in the next session. Okay, so we have now covered the posture, and in the next session we'll go over the actual technique for this practice. For some of you, this will be old news. You will have done this 100 times with other things, but hopefully there'll be some key details that really help. The next session is, I believe, not until 8 o'clock, but I will... Right, yeah, 8 o'clock. So between here and there, if you have an exercise routine, do some exercise just to get the body ready, because we're going to be doing about 5 hours of practice today, about 4.5, 5 hours of practice. So that's going to be a lot of sitting and or standing. So get the body ready to go. And have your first meal of the day. So if you took Mahayana vows and you're in my time zone, you would be having a light breakfast, and then you'd be having lunch at midday. And then that would be it. If you didn't take vows, do whatever you want. Okay, I'll see you in an hour.